The assembly hall hummed with the contained energy of apex predators. It was a sterile, circular chamber of brushed chrome and soft, indirect light, designed to soothe the galaxy's most finely honed killing instincts before they were unleashed. 3 of the 4 participants stood with the coiled stillness of experts confident in their craft. Xylos of the Cathar was a monument to reptilian patience. His multifaceted eyes, 1,000 tiny lenses, scanned the room, cataloging angles and potential threats with cold, geometric precision. His chitinous hide, a mosaic of muted greens and browns, could, with a thought, shimmer and blend into any background. A biological cloaking field perfected over millennia of ambushing prey in the dappled jungles of his homeworld. At his hip was a compact plasma projector, a tool for a single, silent, and surgically precise takedown. For Xylos, the hunt was an art of invisibility and the perfect moment. Beside him, yet a universe away in her philosophy, was Lyra of the Sci-Fi. Her form was deceptively humanoid, slender and graceful, her skin the color of twilight. The Sci-Fi did not hunt with claw or weapon, they hunted with the mind. Lyra's eyes, solid silver orbs without pupils, were windows to a formidable psionic talent. She could project illusions, weave webs of terror in a creature's psyche, or simply whisper a suggestion of profound weariness into its brain, coaxing it into a deep sleep from which it would not wake until the simulation declared it captured. Her hunt was a ballet of psychic dominance. The third was Grolk, a Grawl. He was a mountain of muscle and methodical intellect, his thick, stony hide resistant to all but the most extreme environments. He towered over the others, his heavy, four-fingered hands gently calibrating the energy emitters of the sophisticated containment field he would deploy. The Grawl were trappers, engineers of demise. They studied terrain, calculated trajectories, and created inescapable snares of kinetic force and null-energy zones. Grolk's hunt was a problem of physics and engineering, and he had never encountered a problem he could not solve. And then there was the 4th participant. The human, his name was Elias Thorne. He stood slightly apart, a curiosity of soft flesh and exposed vulnerability. Where the others wore environment suits or possessed natural armor, he wore simple, durable fabric trousers and a sleeveless tunic. Where they had advanced weaponry or innate biological gifts, he had nothing. His hands were empty. His face was unremarkable, etched with the faint lines of a life lived outdoors, his eyes a plain, focused brown. He met the gazes of the others not with a challenge, but with a quiet, unnerving calm. Senior Proctor Kalen, a Vex whose long, elegant form was draped in the ceremonial robes of his office, observed them from the primary control node high above the arena floor. The Vex were the galaxy's chroniclers and referees, a species who had long ago traded their own predatory instincts for a philosophical obsession with observing the instincts of others. The roster is eccentric this cycle, Tella, Kalen said, his voice a low, resonant hum. His junior proctor, a younger Vex with an eager, almost twitchy energy, adjusted the magnification on her own screen. Eccentric senior proctor. The Cathar and the Grawl are classic archetypes. The Sci-Fi provides a fascinating non-physical element, but the human, Tella trailed off, her head tilting. He is registered as unarmed and unaugmented. Is this a political inclusion? A gesture of galactic unity? The official request from the Human Federation cited a demonstration of a foundational ethno-predatory technique, Kalen rumbled, steepling his 3-fingered hands. They were most insistent. The rules of the Grand Hunt stipulate that participants may use only the tools and techniques traditional to their species' predatory history. It seems for humanity, that means walking. Tella let out a short, puffing sound that was the Vex equivalent of a laugh. Walking, the target is a Series 7 Glyptodon, bioengineered for this simulation. It can sustain speeds of 60 kilometers per hour for extended periods. Its hide can deflect low-grade energy bolts. Its senses can detect a Cathar's shimmer at 50 meters, and the human proposes to walk it down, so it would seem, Kalen said, his ancient eyes fixed on Thorne's placid face. Consider him the control group Tella, a baseline against which true predatory excellence can be measured. The final briefing was perfunctory. The target, One of 3 identical glyptodons released into the simulation zone must be subdued, not terminated. Subdual was defined as rendering the target immobile or unconscious for a period of 5 minutes. The simulation zone was a terraformed moon named Xylos 7, a sprawling 300,000 square kilometer expanse of savanna, forest, and rocky highlands, with a standard 30-hour day-night cycle. Participants, you will be inserted at equidistant points from the target's last known location. The hunt begins on my mark. May your instincts serve you well, Kalen's voice echoed in the hall. One by one, the shimmering columns of teleportation beams enveloped them. Xylos vanished with a faint hiss. Lyra dissolved into motes of light. Grulk was simply gone. Elias Thorne closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and then he too was taken. He materialized under a sky of pale lavender. The air was warm, thick with the scent of alien pollen and damp earth. A gentle breeze rustled the tall, reddish grass of the savanna. Elias did a slow 360-degree turn, his senses taking everything in. He was not looking for the glyptodon, not yet. He bent down, his fingers brushing the soil. It was loamy, dark, good for holding tracks. He checked the position of the twin suns, a large yellow and a smaller white dwarf, calculating the time of day. Then he began to walk. It was not a fast walk, not a march. It was a steady, rhythmic, ground-eating pace. The kind of pace one could maintain for a very, very long time. 20 kilometers to the north, Xylos was already a ghost. He had found a ridge overlooking a water source, noted the prevailing winds, and settled into a fissure in the rock. The chromatophores in his hide had perfectly replicated the texture and color of the lichen-spotted stone. To any observer, he was simply part of the landscape. His plasma projector was primed. Now there was only the wait. The art of patience. Lyra on the eastern plains sat cross-legged, her silver eyes closed. Her mind was not in her body, but spread out like a net across the whispering grasses. She felt the scuttling of insectoids, the slow browsing of herbivore herds, the lazy thermal drift of avian hunters in the sky. She was searching for a particular signature of consciousness, the sharp, intelligent, wary mind of the glyptodon. It was a subtle, draining work, but when she found it, she could begin her true hunt, weaving a tapestry of illusion to guide it, tire it, and ultimately lull it into her grasp. Grulk, meanwhile, was happily at work in a narrow canyon to the west. He was assembling his trap, digging shallow trenches for the power conduits, and placing the tri-pronged emitters that would generate a stasis field. The glyptodon, according to the provided schematics, had a predictable flight response when startled. It would seek defensible terrain. This canyon was the perfect funnel. He would spend the first day constructing a masterpiece of engineering, then use a remote sonic pulse to drive the prey into his perfectly laid trap on day 2. The hours passed. The twin suns arced across the sky. The glyptodon, designated target Gamma by the observers, grazed peacefully. It was a magnificent creature, the size of a Terran rhinoceros, with a thick, articulated carapace and a powerful, low-slung body. Its mind was sharp, and it felt the faint, tickling probe of Lyra's psionics from the east. It shifted uneasily, moving away from the sensation. It also smelled something unnatural on the wind from the west, the faint tang of ozone from Grulk's emitters, and instinctively avoided the canyon. It was, however, completely unaware of the rock formation to the north that was not a rock, and it was unaware of the quiet, rhythmic sound that was steadily approaching from the south. The soft thud of booted feet on soil. It heard the sound once, lifted its head, and saw nothing but waving grass. It snorted, dismissing the noise, and trotted a few kilometers away to a richer patch of vegetation. The sound faded. In the control node, Tela monitored the biofeeds. The alien participants are performing as expected, Senior Proctor. Xylos is in position. Lyra has made initial psychic contact, though the target is resisting. Grulk's trap is 70% complete. And the human? Kalen asked, his gaze never leaving the main screen, where a tiny green dot representing Elias Thorne moved in a near-perfectly straight line. He is walking, Tela said, a note of bafflement in her voice. He found the target's initial tracks 2 hours ago and has been following them since. His pace is steady, 5 kilometers per hour, no deviation. He is not running, not sprinting, just walking. Is the target aware of him? Negative. The human is maintaining a distance of approximately 10 kilometers. He's simply following the path the Glyptodon has already taken. As the smaller white sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the landscape in the dusky orange glow of the primary star, the simulation's first cycle drew to a close. Xylos, conserving energy, allowed his camouflage to soften, becoming a distinct shape in the deepening shadows. Grulk admired his handiwork before settling into a low-power hibernation state to rest. Lyra withdrew her psychic net, her mind weary, and entered a meditative trance to recover her strength. All across Xylos 7, the predators rested, preparing for the next cycle, all but one. The tiny green dot on the main screen continued its inexorable, straight-line movement through the twilight. "He's not stopping," Tella whispered, her antennae twitching. "His biosigns show fatigue, but he's ignoring it. He is continuing the pursuit into the night cycle." Leaned forward, the soft light of the monitors reflecting in his ancient eyes. The hunt had been underway for 15 hours. The human had walked 75 kilometers. He hadn't eaten, hadn't drunk from his canteen, hadn't rested for a single minute. The control group was no longer behaving like a control group. "Tella," Kalen said, his voice a low hum of dawning fascination. "Pull up the Terran evolutionary archives. Specifically, data on their pre-spaceflight hunting methodologies. I believe we may have fundamentally misunderstood the nature of this demonstration." Second day dawned, the yellow sun rising to burn the morning mist off the savannah. Target Gamma had spent the night in a state of low-level anxiety. The psionic whisperings from the east had returned intermittently, unsettling dreams of enclosed spaces and deep water that made it shift and move in its sleep. It woke feeling unrested. As it began to graze, a faint, familiar sensation returned. A sound, thud, thud, thud. It was closer this time, much closer. The Glyptodon lifted its heavy head, its auditory sensors swiveling. On the crest of a low hill, perhaps 3 kilometers away, was a silhouette. It was small, bipedal, and utterly still. It wasn't creeping. It wasn't charging. It was just standing there. Watching, a primal instinct, deeper than the manufactured wariness of its conditioning, prickled along the Glyptodon's spine. This was wrong. Predators were supposed to be fast or hidden or overwhelmingly powerful. This thing was none of those. Annoyed and with a growing sense of unease, the Glyptodon snorted and broke into a powerful canter, putting distance between itself and the unnerving figure. It ran for a full hour, covering nearly 40 kilometers, before it felt safe enough to slow down and find a new grazing spot near a grove of pulpy, water-rich cacti. It drank its fill, the exertion forgotten. In his ambush spot, Xylos felt a surge of reptilian fury. The prey had moved completely out of his projected kill zone. He checked the tactical display. The human's icon was still moving, now closing the distance to the Glyptodon's new position. Xylos let out a low hiss of contempt. The fool was just chasing the beast all over the moon, spoiling any chance for a proper ambush for anyone else. It was amateurish, it was clumsy. Yet the Glyptodon was clearly agitated, and its agitation was not directed at him. Lyra felt it too. The psychic texture of the prey's mind had changed. The baseline anxiety had sharpened into a specific, gnawing dread. It wasn't the explosive fear of an ambush, which was the emotion she usually manipulated. It was a slow-burning, corrosive feeling, a fear of inevitability. She focused her senses, trying to read the source of this dread, and found the human. She attempted a light psionic probe, a simple touch to gauge his intent. The response was unlike anything she had ever encountered. It wasn't a shield or a psychic block. There was simply nothing. Or rather, there was a single, unwavering, metronomic thought. Step, breathe, find the track, step, breathe. It was a mind stripped of everything but a single, monotonous, unending purpose. There was no anger, no bloodlust, no pride. Just a quiet, calm, and utterly relentless engine of pursuit. The sheer simplicity of it was more alien to her than any complex psychic fortress she had ever breached. It was like trying to reason with a geological process. She withdrew her mind, a shiver running through her non-physical form. Elia's thorn felt the faint, tickling sensation of the psionic probe and dismissed it as he would a fly. His body was a machine now. The aches and pains of the first day had faded into a dull, background hum. His mind had entered a state his ancestors had called the runner's high, a trance of pure, focused endurance. He wasn't thinking about winning. He wasn't thinking about the other hunters. He was simply in motion. His world had shrunk to the trail in front of him, a broken blade of grass, a scuff in the dirt, the impression of a heavy foot. He was reading a story in the land, and every page told him he was getting closer. He crested the hill and saw his quarry in the distance. He stopped, letting the Glyptodon see him. This was part of it, the visual confirmation. Let it know it was being followed. Let it run. Let it waste its energy. He was not in a hurry. He had all the time in the world. He watched it bolt, then calmly checked its tracks, noted the panicked, splayed markings, and began walking again. "Record this," Kalen commanded, his voice tight. Tella's fingers flew across her console. "He's letting it see him deliberately," Tella noted. "He's sacrificing the element of surprise. Why?" "Because surprise is not his weapon," Kalen murmured. He gestured to a newly opened screen displaying archaic human anatomical data. "Look, bipedalism. The ability to shed heat through sweat over their entire bodies, an Achilles tendon that acts like a spring. They are not the fastest. They are not the strongest, but they are built to endure. They can run or walk for longer than almost any quadrupedal prey animal." "Persistence hunting," Tella breathed, the words from the archive resonating with what she was witnessing. They would chase their prey under the hot sun of their homeworld, not trying to catch it, but simply keeping it moving, preventing it from resting, eating, or drinking, until the prey collapsed from heat exhaustion and fatigue. "This simulation has a mild climate," Tella argued. "And the Glyptodon is far more durable than any Terran ungulate. It can't be a purely physiological attack." "Are correct," Kalen said, his gaze locked on the psychological telemetry from Target Gamma. "Which is why this is something more, something we have never cataloged. He is not just running its body into the ground. He is running its mind into the ground." The proof came late in the second day. The Glyptodon, now desperate for rest, had found a shallow cave to hide in. It backed into the darkness, its heart hammering, its body trembling with fatigue. It had run 3 times that day, each time after seeing the same small figure on the horizon, always at the same steady pace. It closed its eyes, trying to force its body into a state of rest. For a blissful hour there was silence. Hope began to bloom in its panicked mind. Perhaps it had finally lost him. Then it heard the sound, thud, thud. Thud, it was just outside the cave. The Glyptodon's eyes snapped open. It could see the silhouette now, framed against the twilight sky. The human was just standing there, 20 meters from the cave mouth, not approaching, not retreating. Just waiting. A wave of pure, absolute despair washed over the Glyptodon. It wasn't fear of an attack. It was the soul-crushing realization that there was no escape. Hiding was useless. Running was useless. The cave, which had seemed like a sanctuary, now felt like a tomb. It let out a bellow that was not a challenge, but a cry of utter psychological anguish, and burst from the cave, charging past the human in a blind panic. Elias didn't even flinch. He just watched it go, then turned and resumed his steady, rhythmic walk in the direction of its flight. He didn't need to sleep. He didn't need to hide. He was the unwaking eye. The thing that is always there. The notification chimed on the HUDs of the other 3 hunters. It was a general alert. Target Gamma psychological state, critical. Stress levels exceeding simulation safety parameters. Grulk, standing proudly beside his now completed and fully armed trap, grunted in confusion. The prey was nowhere near his position. How could it be in critical condition? He checked the map. The human and the Glyptodon were on the far side of the moon, locked in their bizarre, slow-motion chase. Xylos saw the alert and his multifaceted eyes narrowed in disbelief. The human was breaking the prey without ever touching it. The entire concept was an insult to his philosophy of the clean, sudden kill. This wasn't a hunt. It was a form of methodical torture. A cold knot of something he couldn't identify, not fear, but a deep, professional revulsion, tightened in his gut. Lyra felt the Glyptodon's psychic scream as a raw, painful shockwave. It was the purest despair she had ever touched. It was the terror of a sentient mind being unmade not by a sudden shock, but by the slow, constant, dripping pressure of a single, horrifying truth. It will not stop. She looked at her own hands, at the species that had mastered the art of mental warfare, and realized with a stunning clarity that they had never conceived of a weapon this simple, this brutal, this effective. In the control node, Kalen was silent. Tella had stopped commenting. They were simply watching a new and terrifying chapter of predatory behavior being written before their eyes. The human was not hunting the Glyptodan's body. He was hunting its hope. And he was winning. The third day was a ghost story told across the plains of Xylos 7. Target Gamma was a wreck. Its powerful muscles trembled with unending fatigue. Its mind was a fog of terror and exhaustion. It no longer ran in long, sustained bursts, but in short, panicked shambles. It would run until it could see the horizon was clear, then collapse, panting, its sides heaving. It would snatch a few precious minutes of fitful, nightmarish sleep, and then a sound, or a scent on the wind, or just the sheer, crushing weight of its own paranoia would jolt it awake. And sooner or later, always, the figure would appear. A dot on the horizon, a shape on a ridge, a silhouette against the twin suns. It never hurried, it never shouted, it never brandished a weapon, it just walked. Elias Thorne was now operating in a realm beyond simple endurance. His body was an automaton governed by his will. He was dehydrated, he was calorie deficient, his muscles were screaming for rest. But his mind was a sea of tranquility. He felt a profound, primal connection to the act, a sense of rightness that overrode all physical discomfort. He was a force of nature, like erosion or the tide. He was not a person hunting a creature. He was a process reaching its inevitable conclusion. He knew it was close. The tracks were no longer straight lines of flight, but meandering, confused patterns. The Glyptodan was disoriented. Sometimes it would double back on its own trail, as if forgetting which way it was running. Around noon on the third day, he saw it. It was standing in the middle of an open plain, its great head hanging low. It wasn't looking at him. It was staring at nothing. As Elias continued his steady approach, the Glyptodan turned its head. Their eyes met across a distance of 200 meters. There was no fear left in the creature's eyes, only a vast, empty exhaustion. It had no more run left in it. It had no more hope. It had been pursued beyond the limits of its sanity. The Glyptodan took one stumbling step, then another. Its legs, magnificent pistons of power just 2 days ago, buckled. It collapsed onto the reddish earth with a great sighing groan. It didn't move. It just lay there, its sides rising and falling in shallow, ragged breaths. Its eyes were open, but they were no longer seeing the world. They were seeing the abyss of its own broken will. The simulation's automated voice echoed in Elias' earplug and across the control node. Target Gamma subdued. Cause, physiological and psychological collapse. Hunter. Elias Thorne, Human Federation. Elias did not stop his pace. He walked the final 200 meters, his rhythm unbroken. He approached the fallen creature, his shadow falling across its immense, still form. He knelt, the first time he had broken his upright posture in over 60 hours, and placed his hand gently on the Glyptodan's shoulder carapace. It was the designated gesture of capture. Then, and only then, did he allow himself to sit. He leaned back against the warm, living bulk of his quarry, pulled a canteen from the small pack on his belt, and took a long, slow drink of water. He had won. The debriefing hall was silent. It was a heavy, charged silence that the humming climate control could not dissipate. Xylos stood with his back rigid, his multifaceted eyes fixed on the far wall, refusing to look at the human. His pride was a shattered wreck. He had been out-hunted by a creature with no weapons, no camouflage, no plan other than to simply refuse to quit. It was illogical, inefficient, and utterly humiliating. Grulk stared at his own massive hands. His trap, a monument to engineering and foresight, still stood, unused and pristine in its canyon. He felt a grudging respect. The human had used his own body as the mechanism of the trap. The fuel was his own stamina, the bait was the prey's own hope. It was an elegant, if horrifying, piece of biological engineering. Lyra watched Elias Thorne with an expression of profound, fearful awe. She had spent her life mastering the complexities of the mind, only to see it all undone by a simple, brutal, psychological absolute. The human hadn't used fear as a weapon. He had become fear. An abstract, inescapable concept made manifest in flesh and bone. The thought of what a species capable of such relentless will could do on a galactic scale was terrifying. Elias, for his part, was quiet. He had showered, eaten, and undergone a full medical check. He looked no different from before the hunt, perhaps a little more tired around the eyes, but the same unnerving calm emanated from him. Senior Proctor Kalen entered the room, his long robe sweeping silently across the floor. He did not go to the podium, but stood in the center of the room, his gaze moving over each participant before finally settling on Elias. For centuries, Kalen began, his voice resonating in the quiet hall, the Vex have classified predatory species according to their methodology. The ambush predator, the venomous predator, the pack hunter, the trap builder. These are classifications based on the moment of the kill, on the tools used to achieve it. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. We have been forced to create a new classification today. We have witnessed a technique that does not focus on the moment of the kill, but on the systematic deconstruction of the will to live. It is a hunt that takes place not over meters but over days. Not in the flesh but in the mind of the prey. It does not use speed to close the distance but endurance to erase it. The true horror of this method, Kalen continued, his voice dropping lower, is its inversion of hope. To an animal fleeing a sprinter, every meter gained is a victory. To an animal hiding from an ambusher, every moment of silence is a reprieve. But to the creature you hunted, Mr. Thorne, every escape was a lie. Every moment of peace was merely the prelude to your inevitable reappearance. You did not hunt the creature. You hunted its concept of safety. You made the entire world its prison, and you were the ever-present, ever-patient jailer. You did not need to be faster. You only needed to exist. He turned fully to face the human. We are classifying your technique as pursuit-predation psychological variant. But among my colleagues, we have a simpler, more accurate name for it, the unwaking eye, for the eye that never closes, that never sleeps, that never looks away. Grulk finally spoke, his deep voice rumbling. How? Your bioreadings showed you were operating at a deficit that would have incapacitated my species. Your energy expenditure was unsustainable. Met his gaze. It is difficult to explain, he said, his voice quiet but clear. We carry a quiet engine inside us, a legacy from our origins. For millions of years, this was how we survived. We learned to silence the body's complaints, to find a place in the mind where pain and exhaustion are just noise. We learned to run on will alone. We've built cities and starships, but the engine is still there. We just don't often have a reason to turn it on. The room was silent again. The implications of his words hung in the air. This wasn't a secret military technique. It was a fundamental, dormant part of every human. The friendly diplomats, the boisterous traders, the brilliant scientists, they all carried this quiet, terrifying engine within them. The galaxy had seen humanity as clever, adaptable, and resourceful. They had never seen them as this. They had never understood that beneath the soft skin and civilized veneer lay a predator of a kind they had never imagined. One that could hunt you to the edge of madness and beyond, without ever raising its voice, without ever quickening its pace, without ever needing to sleep. Later, as Elias Thorne stood aboard the transport ship, looking out of a viewport at the stardusted velvet of space, Proctor Kalen's final, private words to him echoed in his mind. You have shown the galaxy something important about your people, Mr. Thorne, the old Vex had said, and it has made us all profoundly curious. If this is what your species is capable of when it looks back at its past, what are you capable of when you look to the future? Elias watched the distant nebulae drift by, feeling the steady, rhythmic beat of his own heart. A quiet engine waiting. He didn't have an answer for the proctor. He only knew that the galaxy suddenly felt a great deal larger and a great deal more like an open plain, waiting for the first footstep of a long, patient hunt.